Hello, my name is Mindy Martin, and today I'm going to be talking to you about diction and how to teach our students how to choose the right word. We start our discussion about diction with the definitions of denotation and connotation. I used to always tell my high school students denotation is the dictionary definition, and all the D's, the alliteration there, help them remember it. And then connotation are the thoughts and feelings associated with the word. So those are just really simple definitions that you're welcome to use in your classrooms as well if you think they'll help. We have to teach our students to choose effective, powerful words, and I truly believe this is one of maybe two priorities that as writing teachers we have to maintain. It's also important when you think about the options that they have for hearing new words and where our vocabulary comes from. Our students may begin elementary school or middle school or college with very limited vocabularies because they are exposed to only a set way of speaking at home. A study by Dominic Wise that studied mainly middle schoolers came up with 5 different areas that affect our students' diction. The first one was their interaction with other people, including us as teachers, how we influence their word choice and how we may encourage them in their word choice. Their second influence in word choice is their knowledge of their topic. If they know more about it, they'll write more. Level of formality, if they feel like they're supposed to be friendly or very formal, they will choose different words in those situations as well. Text features in the given genre, for example, if you ask them to write an academic paper versus if you ask them to make a poster, they're going to choose different words in those cases as well. And finally, audience awareness, what they think their audience knows and what they think their audience expects to learn from them will influence their diction as well. In addition, we have to think about the level of formality that we have in our spoken language and the level of formality that we maintain in our academia. So with that said, even we graduate or bachelor level students are going to speak differently and write differently, probably. So we have to assume that our students are going to do that as well. We talk about how we teach diction and how would we go about that. I'm going to talk to you about how to simulate. I'm going to simulate a teaching activity that I would do for my students. And this is always a good way to get them thinking about their own thoughts and feelings. I would ask you, as my students, to take out a sheet of paper. And I would write a word on the board. I would turn around behind me, and I would write the word man. Other times, I might use the word lady or home, but always those 3. But I would just write one of those words for our purposes, and I would say, I'm going to give you 90 seconds. And in that 90 seconds, I want you to fill this page up with words that you think describe that term. At the end of the 90 seconds, I would ask you to stop writing, and at that point I would begin a discussion with the whole group about what we have on our papers. At first, probably, as my students, you would be reluctant to share what you had written on your paper. But as I talk, especially about a word like man, most people have written down words such as strong, tough, courageous, big, things like that. And as we do our group discussion and I start to open them up, they start to say, that's not really what a man is. That's not really what I think a man does. They're also kind. They're also they're good providers. And they begin to realize that what they had as their societal understanding of the connotation there is actually not what they feel at all. So they begin to think about what they actually believe a man to be. So that is just one activity that I've had a lot of success with in teaching connotation. When I think about teaching diction, I think that it has to happen at the beginning of the writing process and then again at the end. For example, I think the first thing we have to do is teach vocabulary. When we equip our students with the tools, the vocabulary words that they need in order to make creative sentences and strong, entertaining sentences, we have to teach them vocabulary. An article that I read called Effective Ways to Promote Word Power made a lot of sense. It talked about using a fishnet approach to teaching vocabulary, picking out some random words, putting them on a list, memorize them. It doesn't work. But if we teach our students words related to synonyms and antonyms of each other on a list, if we give them the etymology of those words, if we use word derivatives to help them understand what the word means and how this word may be related to this word, then we're going to give them some retention with those vocabulary words. Now they have the tools in order to revise and edit their papers for good diction. And I allude to my next thing when I say that, because the second thing that we can do on the other end of the writing process is to teach revision. We, as teachers and people who have written very much probably, know how to write and how important it is to revise our papers. Our students don't know that yet. They are lazy for the most part, and they don't want to do a revision if this one's okay. So we have to teach them the importance of that. We have to encourage them to use a thesaurus in appropriate times, not for every other word in their paper. We have to train them to find the neutral words in their papers or the ones that have the incorrect connotation. And I'll get to some ways that we do that in just a moment. I don't like to stifle creativity in my students, so I tell them, just write. Don't worry about getting the correct word or stopping your process to think of the correct word. So a strategy I've employed in that is I've taught them to circle a word if you're unsure about it or you don't like it, and you can always come back later. That really doesn't slow them down, and they know where their problem areas are. Finally, give them an opportunity to either meet with you one-on-one and discuss their papers or peer edit one another's writing specifically for diction. You cannot allow a student to just peer edit another person's paper for everything because they'll end up changing the whole thing. I've seen it happen lots of times. But if you tell them a specific purpose, we're looking for neutral words that could be stronger. They actually can really help one another. I look at the question of when diction should be taught, and the simple answer is continuously. Always. We think about in our writing, and Joseph Epstein was one of the authors that I consulted on this. He was a longtime English professor, and he compares learning to write well to the process of learning a musical instrument. And he says we have to practice writing just as we would practice our piano scales and maybe produce a lot of bad material before we come up with some good stuff. Also, Mr. Epstein alludes to the fact that because he was better read than most of his students, he was able to bring them more options. When he would critique a sentence, they didn't really know another way to say it, but because he was a well-read man, he could say, here are a few options. And that is one of the most important things in my opinion. My best readers have always been my best writers in class. To answer that question more specifically, when should we teach diction, we say the best time, and I truly believe this as well, is right after they've written a rough draft. At that point, they can go back, look at their circled words, and decide, do I want to change this word? Does it convey the meaning that I expect it to? You can have them read their papers aloud, even if it's to themselves, and they will hear their errors before they'll read them mentally. So that's a great tip as well. And then again, as I mentioned earlier, sit down with them and have a 5-minute conversation. Ask them, how did you decide on this word? Ask them, can you think of a word that would fit better? And a lot of times, if you get them thinking about a few of their words, they'll think about all of them. Finally, to conclude, think about who uses thoughtful diction and who should we be looking at as our models. And the answer is professional writers. We want our students, and this being a writing classroom, we want our students to be good writers. And when they master diction, that will happen. However, the side effect is that they'll also be better readers. In a study that I looked at in an article, it took the work of Charles Chestnut, specifically the story The Wife of His Youth, and it talked about the contradictions in form and content because of the diction level of Mr. Ryder versus Liza Jane. So it's a really interesting topic, and if you study diction along with content, it makes a lot of sense. So, to conclude, writing is a process, and choosing the right word is a huge part of that process. So, thank you very much.